In the previous video, we recorded some of the transactions of Primark merchandising. The last two journal entries we prepared were in connection with the sale of merchandise on account to Harriet Crisologo on April 8. The first of which was meant to record the sale where we debited accounts receivable for the invoice price of 14,000 pesos, while the second was to record prepayment of the freight on the sale where we made another debit to accounts receivable in the amount of 1,200 for a total accounts receivable from Harriet of 15,200. That is 14,000 plus 1,200. Now, let's continue with the next transaction of Primark, still with Harriet Crisologo. April 14. Harriet Crisologo paid Primark 9,000 pesos. Obviously, this transaction decreased the cash of Harriet because she paid Primark. But since we are not on the viewpoint of Harriet but of Primark, which received the cash payment, instead of crediting cash to decrease it, we must debit it in order to increase by 9,000. Then credit what? Accounts receivable. Because this transaction on April 14 was not another sale to Harriet. That's why we cannot credit sales here, but connected with the previous sale on account on April 8. So what Harriet paid for here on April 14 was a partial payment of her accounts payable. Hence, from Primark's perspective, its accounts receivable from Harriet decreased. And so to decrease, accounts receivable must be credited for 9,000. Note that since this was only a partial payment, Harriet was not entitled to the cash discount, even if the payment was made within the discount period. For a discussion about why, in my illustrations, cash discount is not granted to the buyer for partial payment, even if made within the discount period, please watch part 4 of this lecture series. Let's finish our entry with an explanation to record partial collection of account. April 15. Sold merchandise to Starlight Venture, 24,000 pesos. Credit sales or sales revenue because of the word sold merchandise for 24,000. Then debit accounts receivable for the same amount because of the term 2/5 and over 15. So it's understood to be a sale on account, not on cash basis. Explanation to record sale on account. If this were a quiz or a test, don't commit the mistake of immediately moving forward to the next date because we are not done yet with this one on April 15. Notice this freight prepaid, 500 pesos. So what must be the entry for this freight cost? When the term is FOB destination, who must debit the account title freight? The seller. Remember, DESE, destination, seller. And who was the seller? Primark or Starlight? Primark. And since we are on the viewpoint of Primark, who was the seller, we must debit freight out. Not freight in, but freight out. Because the merchandise goes out from the premises of the seller. For how much? 500. Then consider also freight prepaid, who actually paid cash to the courier for the delivery cost when it's freight prepaid. The seller. And because the seller was Primark, in whose perspective we are recording the transactions, we must credit cash for 500 to record freight on the sale. The following day, April 16, Starlight reported that an item in the shipment was defective. Primark agreed for Starlight to retain the item but will be credited for 1,000 pesos. A merchandise previously sold by Primark to Starlight was defective, but instead of returning it to Primark, Starlight asked for a price reduction of 1,000 pesos, to which Primark agreed. Was there a sales return on the part of Primark? None, because Starlight did not return the defective item, but retained it or kept it. So what transaction was this? A sales allowance from Primark, the seller's viewpoint, which must be recorded by Primark, still using the account name, sales returns, and allowances. That's why this account name is not just sales returns, but sales returns and allowances, to include not just a return, but also a reduction in the price of merchandise, not because of trade discount or cash discount, but because the item was defective. Remember part 1 of this video series? The account title Sales Returns and Allowances is also used by the seller when the product sold by the company is damaged or has a defect, but the buyer, instead of returning it, asked for a reduction in the price, and the seller agreed to such price decrease. And what is the normal balance of sales returns and allowances? Debit. If there is a debit, there must be a credit. What account must be credited? Accounts receivable. Because remember, the sale to Starlight prior to this date was on account. So the accounts receivable of Primark from Starlight must be credited in order to decrease it due to the price reduction. Primark agreed for Starlight to retain the item, but will be credited for 1,000 pesos. Then, have some words for an appropriate explanation of the entry. April 18. Received a check from Harriet Crisologo for the balance of her account. The receipt of a check is equivalent to receipt of cash. Therefore, we must debit cash. The question is, why did Harriet issue a check to Primark? Take note that this April 18 transaction was not Primark's first transaction with Harriet Crisologo. We have encountered the name Harriet Crisologo before, right? Harriet had made a purchase on account, resulting to an increase in Primark's accounts receivable. That accounts receivable was the reason why Harriet subsequently issued a check to Primark on April 18. When Primark Merchandising received the check, what do you think happened to Primark's accounts receivable from Harriet? It decreased. And to decrease accounts receivable being an asset, we have to credit it. And actually, even in case we forgot for a while the previous sale on account to Harriet, we should know that the issuance of the check was in payment for Harriet's accounts payable to Primark or Primark's accounts receivable from Harriet, because it says here, for the balance of her account, meaning for the balance of her accounts payable to Primark or for Primark's accounts receivable from her. Next question, how much must we credit accounts receivable for? For the balance of her account. Prior to this transaction on April 18, how much was the balance of Primart's accounts receivable from Harriet? We must go back to all previous transactions with Harriet and consider any debit or credit to accounts receivable to know the answer. The first one was on April 8, where we debited accounts receivable for 14,000. And then another entry on the same date for the freight, where we again debited accounts receivable for 1,200. So after this entry, how much was the balance of the accounts receivable from Harriet? Debit 14,000 and debit 1,200. So we add for a total of 15,200. But then on April 14, we credited accounts receivable for Harriet's partial payment of 9,000. So the previous balance of 15,200 minus this credit of 9,000 equals 6,200 balance of the accounts receivable before the final payment by Harriet. If you want, you can prepare a T account for Primart's accounts receivable from Harriet to arrive at the 6,200 balance, which we must credit on the journal of Primart for the receipt of the check from Harriet on April 18. The next question we need to answer is, was Harriet entitled to the cash discount? When did she purchase the goods from Primart? April 8. What's the discount period? 10 days. Count 10 days from April 8. April 18 was the last day of the discount period. It was exactly on that last day, April 18, when she made full payment. So was Harriet entitled to the cash discount? Yes. On the part of Primart, what was that discount? Sales discount. Normal balance of sales discount. Debit. What must be the basis of the 2% discount? This final payment of 6,200 only, or including the partial payment on April 14 amounting to 9,000? Including this 9,000, because this was also made within the discount period, right? But excluding this accounts receivable amounting to 1,200 arising from the freight paid by Primart, which must have been shouldered or paid by Harriet to the courier. So again, this time using this accounts receivable ledger or T account, which we used a while ago, the basis of the 2% cash discount must be the final payment of Harriet of 6,200 plus her partial payment of 9,000 minus the accounts receivable for the freight of 1,200 equals 14,000, or simply this 14,000 invoice price, because the accounts receivable of Primart arising from the prepayment of the freight amounting to 1,200 is not subject to discount, even if paid by Harriet in full within the discount period. If you remember, in my last video, before I ended that episode, I discussed about this already. I even told you then to please keep that in mind. That is very important. Knowing now the basis of the 2% discount, which is the selling price of 14,000, we can already get the amount to be debited to sales discounts. That is 280, computed by multiplying 14,000 by 0.02. the amount of cash is just balancing figure. 6,200 minus 280 equals 5,920. To record final collection of account net of discount. April 30. Receive payment from Starlight Venture for the amount due. This is not the first time we encountered Starlight Venture, right? Primart previously sold goods on account to Starlight. That's why this receipt of payment by Primart was for that accounts payable of Starlight or accounts receivable of Primart from Starlight. From Primart's viewpoint then, being the seller, the journal entry for this April 30 transaction must be a debit to cash because it received payment, and a credit to accounts receivable for its entire or full balance because of the words for the amount due, plus a debit to sales discounts if this payment by Starlight was within the discount period. Let's find out if the payment was within or beyond the discount period. Full payment was made on April 30. The sale occurred on April 15. Discount period, 5 days only. So the payment on April 30 was beyond the discount period. Therefore, Starlight was not able to avail of the discount, and we must not debit sales discounts on the journal of Primart. So only cash and accounts receivable were affected by the full payment transaction on April 30. The question is, how much was the balance of Primart's accounts receivable collected from Starlight on April 30? On the date of sale, we debited accounts receivable for 24,000. The freight related to the sale did not affect accounts receivable. But on April 16, we credited accounts receivable in the amount of 1,000. Hence, the 24,000 debit minus this 1,000 credit equals 23,000. Balance of the accounts receivable collected by Primart, which was also the amount of cash paid by Starlight because there was no discount. Next is explanation for the entry. May 9. Paid Shalom Company the amount owed on the April 5 purchase. Credit, cash because of the word paid. Primart Merchandising paid Shalom Company the amount owed on the April 5 purchase. What must come to mind when we see the word owed? Liability, specifically accounts payable. In other words, Primart Merchandising paid Shalom Company because Primart had an accounts payable as a result of the purchase on April 5. After the payment, the cash of Primart decreased, so we credited cash, while its accounts payable decreased, so we debited accounts payable. Was Primart able to pay within the discount period? So we should credit purchase discounts here. Date of purchase, April 5. Credit term, 1/10 EOM, N/90. This is not 1/10 N/90, but 1/10 EOM, N/90. Meaning the buyer, in this case Primart, gets 1% discount if it is able to pay within 10 days, not from the date of purchase or invoice date, but from the end of the month of purchase. In short, 10 days from the end of April, 10 days from April 30. So what's the last day of the discount period? May 10. And since Primark paid the amount owed, meaning the full amount of its accounts payable to Shalom, on May 9, must we debit or credit purchase discounts? Credit purchase discounts. But how much must be the amounts here? What amount do we need to find out first? The amount of the accounts payable. And to be able to do that, we have to go back to all previous transactions concerning Shalom Company. On April 5, we credited accounts payable for 85,500. The payment of freight on April 6 did not affect accounts payable. On April 7, we debited accounts payable for 4,000. So 85,500 credit minus 4,000 debit equals 81,500 balance of the accounts payable paid on May 9, which must be the basis of the 1% cash discount to arrive at the amount of 815 credited to purchase discounts. If the cash discount was 1%, how many percent was paid in cash? 99% or 0.99 multiplied by 81,500 equals 80,685. Check our figures. 815 plus 80,685 equals 81,500 total credit, which is also the amount of our total debit. Finally, explanation. To record payment of account net of discount. Thank you once more for watching.